Welcome to Living Life in Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. This is a global vitiligo awareness and education podcast. You will hear the true and authentic stories from people living with vitiligo. You'll also hear from their loved ones, medical professionals, licensed mental health therapists, relationship counselors, global vitiligo support foundations and organizations, and so much more. Sit back and enjoy living life and love with vitiligo. Once again, I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome to Living Life and Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. On today's show, I have Stephanie Ritcherson with me. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hello. Hi, Mark.
How are you, Steph?
Pretty good.
Can I call you Steph or Stephanie?
You can call me Steph.
Okay. I'm like, well, let me make sure first. So welcome to the show. I wanted to have you on to have this important discussion. But before we get there, I'm going to let you officially introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll kind of jump into our conversation.
Okay. So I am Stephanie Ritcherson. I am born and raised Austin, Texas. So I'm a Southern girl. I am a licensed mental health counselor. In Texas, we're called LPC, so it's a licensed professional counselor. And I'm also currently working on my PhD in human sexuality with a concentration on Black males and sexual assault. And I also do a lot with relationships, families, couples, groups, and individuals.
So thank you very much for that, Stephanie. So far, watchers and listeners and viewers, whatever you want to call yourselves out there, that's a lot to unpack. And I will have Stephanie come back because we are going to dig a little bit more into some of the relationship discussions. Today's discussion is connected to that in a sense. We're going to talk about communication and communication styles and a few other things of communication because that is very important. That's one of the areas which we do every single day, but sometimes we struggle with it. No matter how well you think you communicate, no matter how trained you are, you have those moments where you don't communicate well. And I agree. I admit to that. You know, I'm a school teacher and I do not always communicate well with my students, especially if I'm upset. But we'll get to that part later. So let's start it off this way, Stephanie. Let's talk about why is communication so important for us, for all of us?
Okay. So as human beings, we're created to crave and want to be in relationships. And relationships just means you're not meant to be on this planet alone. There are other people. So with that, with relationships, there comes the need to communicate. So communication is important, one, for you, because you need to interact with other human beings, but it's also important for the other person because they need to know where you're coming from and also how to interact with you. So communication has evolved greatly. If you think about cavemen, language has evolved. Means of communication has evolved, especially nowadays with social media and technology. So you can't be on this planet without communicating. I mean, you can, but it's not healthy. So a healthy part of relationships and being a human being is the ability to communicate.
Absolutely. Oh, and I'm glad you said that because that's one of the things I've always struggle with in a sense when I hear people say, do it yourself. I don't need anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. And I have those moments when I don't want to talk to people, but I still need people. To tie it into something a little personal. When my father passed away, some people didn't understand why I went back to work so soon. Well, I told them I needed to be around people. Sitting in silence and staring at the walls and trying to figure out what's next in life and all that, that wasn't healthy for me. I work with kids. I needed to see the kids. I needed to see my coworkers. I needed to be able to laugh.
Mm.
I needed to be able to hear the kids screaming, although I'm like, oh my gosh, they're so loud. But I needed to be around that environment and hear that, because I do recognize I need people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm an introvert by nature. I don't like to deal with a lot of people. I have my moments where I don't want to be around people, but I still need people.
Hmm. Hmm. I totally agree. I am also an introvert, but there's this need for interacting with other people. And also, you don't live on this planet alone. You have needs, and one of those needs is connection.
Right.
And so communication is a huge part of connection. You can't connect without communicating.
Absolutely. And some people say I talk to myself and I don't need to talk. Well, you can talk to yourself and you can change your voice, but you're still not connecting with another person. You're just changing your voice. But yeah, we do need other people. We need to and just for clarification, and we're not talking about relationship like boyfriend girlfriend. We're just talking about just average everyday connection with
Mhm.
people, co-workers, strangers. When we go in the grocery store, no matter where we go, we're going to speak to somebody.
Right. Family members,
Right.
strangers, your best friend. We communicate with everybody, not just in romantic relationships.
Absolutely. Sometimes we talk to our animals, our dogs, our
Oh,
pets. They may not talk back, but they do understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if I say
And
to the dog,
there's an exchange.
yeah,
There's an
absolutely.
exchange, whether it's words, expression, physical touch. Like there's an exchange of in communication. It's a two-way street.
Absolutely. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but I do want to say I talk to the dog. If I say to the dog, hey, let's go for a walk. Oh, he knows.
Mhm.
He's
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, walk, let's go.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll get into some of that verbal, nonverbal, all that a little bit later. But let's talk about the different communication styles, because some people feel like, oh, I only talk this way. This is how I communicate, and I don't know any other way. But there are four that most on average I say four. Sometimes I've read five, but for the most part, four.
There's four. You're correct.
And yeah, I looked at other publications. Sometimes they'll throw something in there, and I'm thinking, yeah, but everybody else says four, but now you're saying five. But let's stick with the four.
Yeah, let's stick with the four.
Yes. So can you elaborate a little bit on the four? I'll throw them out there and just you kind of share, I guess, your insight and thoughts.
Okay.
This one, a lot of us use. I used it a lot too. Got a lot better at it as I'm getting older. I'm getting a lot better at not doing this. This is passive.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some detail or insight about passive communication and why it can be challenging?
Yeah. So passive communication is you're usually soft-spoken. You allow others the space, and you kind of sit back. You may be, especially if you're an introvert like I am, you may be having a conversation, but nobody hears it because it's in your head, right? And you let other people have the floor. You prioritize other people's needs over yours. Like, I'm gonna let them talk because what they have to say is so important, and what I have to say may not be that important, or nobody wants to hear what I have to say. No eye contact, and usually kind of flat affect, and not a lot of self-esteem or self-confidence. But once again, it's all like internal.
Right. I was thinking about that too. Is it always a bad thing? Reason why I'm thinking about that, because there are some people when I sense or feel their energy, something doesn't feel right, so I can't quite open like I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as introverts, sometimes we are watching people, we're listening to them, and although we may want to say something, we, like you said, we hold it in.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something about that individual that makes me say, don't even bother, or they're not the word is not inviting. They're not as, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a word, not inviting, but
Engaging?
they don't feel as safe
Okay.
as I'm gonna put safe because I think that's a good word.
Okay.
They're not as safe as I think they should be.
Mhm. So
Um,
if you think about intent,
mhm,
all human behavior serves a purpose. If it didn't, we wouldn't do it. You know,
right,
whatever you do, you're doing it for a reason. And if a person decides to be quiet, sit back, observe, there's a reason for that. And with someone who's passive, it could be, like I said, low self-esteem, not feeling important. In your situation, what you mentioned makes me think of like being cautious and protective.
yes,
So there are reasons why we do what we do. And you may be passive in a certain setting and, you know, more assertive and or aggressive in another setting.
right,
So,
right.
right.
Okay, and now we're gonna get to the assertive last, but let's go to the aggressive. Like that one, we see a lot, and I hate to say it in this political climate. We see a lot of that. I'm not going to say with whom or whatever, but you watch it on TV. There are ads that run here in North Carolina. We have some people that are very aggressive,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
somebody must have said something because this particular individual has stepped it back to
mhm.
seem a little more soft. And it's like, that's not your true nature. We seen that true
Right,
nature.
right.
So tell us a little bit more about aggressive communication.
So aggressive is very me centered. It's all about me. What I have to say is important. So more talking, less listening. And once again, when you look at intent, it is to take over a conversation, to stand out, to get their point across, and nobody else's point matters. It's just all about me, 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 me. Critical, loud, um, unbending, you know, they're just very you know them when you see them.
Right, right.
Disrespectful, not taking anybody else's feelings into account. That's aggressive.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I've seen that. This is good to talk about for our educators because when we sit in our meetings, sometimes we have those coworkers who are very aggressive. They know everything about everything, and nobody else's idea or thought is important. And even sometimes we use that in the classroom against students because we feel like I'm the adult, I have
Right.
the experience, so you don't know anything. You just need to listen to me, and that's really not good because what is an aggressive communicator? What are some of the negative aspects towards somebody they're communicating with? How does it impact them?
Well, the other person probably feels less important, insignificant, maybe even bullied because the other person's words are taking over like the whole space. Um, if you get a passive person with an aggressive person, the passive person may just shut down because what I have to say is not important. What you'll see with aggressive communication is loudness. They'll be loud, as if the louder I get, the the more important I am.
Right.
Like the person that you mentioned, we won't
Yeah.
say his name.
Right. Right. We're not going to say names.
We're not going to say his name. Yeah, but
You know, I've been in friendships. I'm just put it that way. In friendships like that, where I recognized I was passive. For one, I didn't want conflict.
yeah.
And I think sometimes an aggressive person can feed off of that. If they realize you don't want conflict, good, I have the advantage.
Hmm. Hmm.
And let me say this for somebody who's passive, sometimes you got to be careful because that person could be passive because they know what may happen if they open up their mouth and what may come out and they may explode. And yeah,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
and we'll get into some of that in a few, but let's talk about the other two, then we'll come back to that.
Hmm.
So the next one is passive aggressive.
Right. So passive aggressive is the person who wants to say something but not offend. So not in a way where it's obvious that they're trying to hurt your feelings or even like talk. And the intent in that is I don't want to be the bad guy. But I need to say this anyway, but not in a way where I'm going to offend you. So passive aggressive is it's aggressive language, but in a passive way, if that
Right.
makes sense. Sarcasm, being cynical, kind of dry humor. That's passive aggressive.
Okay. And I've heard people, I've seen it on Facebook. People will use it towards teachers because they'll make comments like, "Oh, it must be nice to have off the whole summer." But you don't have to do anything but sit around and no. Most of us want to work because of those 2 months. We don't get a paycheck,
Right?
so that means you're broke for 2 months. No, we don't. Just we would rather work.
Yeah.
And I get it. Sometimes it is in a joking way. But also as educators, sometimes we do get offended because people don't understand, or they may make comments about teachers don't know how to handle behaviors or work with students because XYZ. We hear these things. It's sometimes it's done in a sarcastic way, but we
Right.
also realize it's like you're taking a dig at us.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And it's someone. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's kind of the intent is to hurt, but not in a direct way. So, I'm still safe and you're not going to become aggressive with me because I didn't come at you in an aggressive way, but right. I got my point across and I got my dig in.
Right. And I'm gonna say this: it's better to get your dig in at the beginning of the school year on the teacher, because don't do it mid-year or towards the end of the year, because we're done. We don't have the patience anymore. You don't know what we're gonna say, what we're gonna do. So get it in now before school starts. Don't wait, because you wait, you don't know what we might say. The last one is assertive, and that is the one that most people really want to strive to get to. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, so assertive is respectful, for one. You are getting your needs met, but in consideration of the other person's. You're not holding back. You listen without interrupting. The other person's point of view is also relevant and important. And at the same time, you stand up. You stand up for your rights. You're very confident, secure, eye contact, shoulders back. You feel good about yourself and what you're trying to communicate. And you're also willing to compromise.
Right. And that compromise is important. When we are communicating, so sometimes, when you're reading an article, it may say that you're either one of the 4 different communication styles. But I kind of feel like I am one of the 4, depending on situations, depending on the people I'm around, depending on how I feel for the day.
Yeah.
Because I have my days I don't feel like talking,
Yeah.
So I'm going to be very passive, may not really say much, don't want the conflict, don't want to hear the loud, all that mess. And then there are days that I might be aggressive depending on, once again, my feelings, my mood, what's happening.
Absolutely. Setting can dictate how you communicate. And intent, once again, like today, I don't want to interact, so I'm going to be more passive. I'm more aggressive today because, this is something that I'm really passionate about.
Now, let me ask you this before we dig into a few other things. When you're communicating with someone, and I think about myself, I use myself as an example. There were times I didn't want to deal with any conflict. And like I said before, I was very passive. I was shut down, not because I wanted to, I needed time to process what was happening, what was being said, how it was being said. We'll get into that, to the how in a minute, but how it was being said. But then it was sometimes it was the loudness, how loud the person was talking, what was coming out of their mouth. And, I had to make a choice. Do I respond? Or do I sit and take it? or just tune it out,
Mhm.
you know. And of course that brought up other issues and challenges, when you decide I'm not going to give this person a feed into what they're giving me,
Mhm.
trying to be the bigger, better person. In moments like that, when there's that conflict with communication styles, how do you handle that? Or is there a right or wrong way to do so?
Are you asking how do you handle it when you're in the conflict, or?
Yeah, I would say when you're in the middle, because I
Yeah.
think before it gets there, I think a lot of us can kind of back away, get out, move to, another environment. But once you're stuck in it,
Yeah.
what are some things or tools that we can do to help us, I guess, navigate
Mhm.
when it's like a minefield?
I think the important thing is to pay attention to your own emotions in that moment. Do you feel safe? Do you feel threatened? Do you feel like what you have to say is important or even valid? And then you act accordingly. Once again, intent. Do you want to preserve the relationship?
Right.
Because sometimes preserving the relationship means walking away, zipping it, or like you said, processing it so you don't say something that can damage the relationship. And that's important in the workplace, right?
Right. Right.
With your boss, say for instance, you could have a boss that's aggressive, right? Um, do you want to meet it head on, aggressive to aggressive, and perhaps damage the relationship with the boss? Do you want to just cower and walk away and, then maybe be seen as someone who won't stand up for themselves? So you evaluate your emotions. How do I feel? And then what's my intent, and what's the result, and is it what I want?
Right.
Yeah.
And I've had a situation like that with a boss. Um, and he wasn't necessarily aggressive, but there was something that happened early in the day, and it was it offended me. And I did not want to say, coworkers are pushing you, go ahead and say something now. And I'm thinking, no, I'd rather approach it when I've had time to process what I want to
Mhm.
say, how I want to say it, because that's a big part, how you say things.
Mhm.
And once I was able to get my thoughts together, and it was towards the end of the day, and I asked him, can I come in and have a conversation? And we sat down and we talked, and it was probably the best thing that ever happened for that working relationship.
Mhm.
Because he didn't know I was offended.
Right.
And once I explained why and went to details, that, if we're going to be equal, you got to make sure it's equal for all people.
Mhm.
And it's a long story about what happened. But once I explained it to him, he saw it and he apologized and we shook hands. It was cool. Everything was squashed. And but I felt, had I immediately reacted
Mhm.
from how I was feeling in the beginning and not taking that time for myself, it could have turned out a lot worse.
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
Probably would have said something, maybe lost my job, or he might have said, go home for the day and come back on Monday or something,
Mhm.
extended
Mhm.
vacation. Oh, and I think when we are communicating, a lot of times what comes out and how we communicate is based on how we feel, not
Right.
what we're thinking.
Right. However,
Uh-oh, here we go.
what what we are thinking influences what we are feeling.
That's true.
Right.
That
Right.
that is true.
So, like, if someone, say your boss, is like talking loud, and you're thinking this person's trying to punk me, or this person doesn't respect me, then your feelings become probably defensive or maybe even cautious. And
Right.
then how you communicate back is according to how you feel. So all feelings start with a thought, believe it or not.
No, I believe it. Oh, look, I work in the school system. I have a lot of thoughts, but it's all in. And I try to, and this is just for me, I try to process and think it through. If I go in it with fire, I'm
Mhm.
going to get fire back.
Mhm.
I can go in with a little bit of passion to
Yeah.
get that point across and they understand how I'm feeling. But if I go on if I'm feeling timid, they
Mhm.
might just overlook me, be like, talk to him, you know.
Right.
So yeah, so you do have to process. I'm a processor. I like to think
Mhm.
before I speak.
Good.
Now I'm gonna say now. When I was younger, yeah, if I thought it, it came out.
Oh yeah.
And you know, and didn't care how it impacted somebody else. If it hurt your feelings, or it just hurt
Yeah.
your feelings, get over it. But I think as we get older, sometimes, not for all people, we learn that, like you said, it's a compromise. You know, I
Mhm.
got to be careful and mindful about how what I say or do may hurt somebody else. And that relationship, friendship, whatever type of ship may be impacted.
Right.
And how important is this person to me? You
Mhm.
know,
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah. When you're younger, that consequence or the result of your behavior is not immediately thought about. It's like you're very impulsive.
right.
You said this, you disrespected me. Now I'm angry. Now I'm gonna cuss you out. Whereas now, as an adult, you're like, if I cuss you out, I might lose my job, or you may not like me anymore. And so you think about the consequences.
Absolutely. Real quick, let's talk about there's we talked about the communication styles, but
Mhm.
let's talk about ways we communicate. I think that's important because
Mhm.
everybody has a different way of communicating. Where some people they talk all day. They could
Yeah.
talk, 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 talk. Some people may think I talk a lot on this podcast. I talk a lot on the podcast, but when I'm done, I may be done talking for a while and I just
Right.
want to sit and not speak for the next hour or two. Yeah, I
Hmm.
can sit for 2 hours and not say a word. And then there's the nonverbal, the body language, that tells a lot.
Oh yeah.
I may not have to say a word, but my shoulders,
Mhm.
I'm gonna get to. I got a story for almost everything, but
Mhm.
names. I'm not gonna say names, but I remember being upset back. It's probably my early 20s. In a relationship, saw some things, and one of my friends saw me. He was like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm thinking I'm good. I wasn't. I
Mm.
felt the heat on my body because I was angry. I was angry, but he said my shoulders were hunched over, and I just the look on my face. He said, "That's not you." And I had explained, what was happening, what went down. But sometimes we don't see it, our
Right.
body language and what we're presenting to other people, but they
Hmm.
can see it. And sometimes they may think we're upset, and they could be true, or standoffish, whatever, and could be true, maybe not. And also visual communication. Like I like to draw, I like to paint.
Hmm.
I have kids in my class that will do that to communicate with me. They might draw a picture and just give
Yeah.
it to me. And I
Hmm.
get what they're saying from the picture. They might not even say a word. They just draw to give it to me.
Hmm.
And sometimes the written, I like to write. Some kids like to write. They write notes all day. To me, that's an art that we stop doing as people. We don't like to write people letters.
I know.
We'll text them all day long. Text, text, text. Just write somebody a letter.
Yeah.
Um,
Texting is not the same.
Absolutely. With those different styles, what does that truly say about a person? What are your thoughts about that? The person that's verbal versus nonverbal versus or how are they related? In terms of communicating.
I think like nonverbal communication, not only you said body language, also tone.
Hmm.
And then there's the written communication. Some people use music to communicate.
Yep.
Some people use dance movement to
Right.
communicate. I think it all depends on the person, and it's their means of communication and what they feel most comfortable with. You're gonna find relationships where someone's very verbal and someone's very nonverbal. And I
Right.
don't mean like I mean like someone likes to talk and someone likes to give you a hug.
Right. Right.
That's their way of communicating to you. Neither way is better or worse, good or bad, but it also depends on the situation. Like if you're at work and you're in a meeting and your boss asks you a question, you can't answer with right.
Or run up to your boss and give your boss a hug.
Right.
No, wait a minute. Hold on. We talked
So
about this in human resources.
the setting and the situation dictates whether it's appropriate. And,
Right.
Society tells us what's appropriate and what's not. Can't get around that. But what's appropriate in the moment. But I find conflict in relationships when somebody wants to talk and the other person doesn't want to talk.
Right.
I need space, and I'm listening to you. You got my attention, eye contact, I'm nodding. All of those are nonverbal cues to let you know that I'm listening to you, but I just don't want to talk right now. And so that can make the other person upset or think that they don't matter or think that you don't care. But it all depends on the situation and who you are, whether or not you're more verbal, nonverbal, music, art.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have my moments, just to be honest, I have my moments where I want to talk and I'll talk and talk. But then it can shut down just like that, where I'm talked out and I just want to sit quietly, or I want to sit and listen to music, watch TV. I don't want to have a conversation at that point. If you see me, I'm watching TV, don't just give me my chance to watch TV and then I'll be ready to talk again. Or if it's a heated debate or argument, let's say even with just a friend, not even relationship stuff, like give me a moment to process, like to think about why are we even upset? We have differences of opinion and we're both upset about something because we don't think the same way. But guess what? We're people. We don't think the same way. We don't process the same way. And I know for myself, I try to figure out how can we get past this? What is it that we both need to get past it? Is it an apology or high five, fist bump? Just something like I feel like if our communication styles are bumping heads, or has created some type of strife between the two of us, let's figure out how we can get past it.
Yeah. And that's when I keep bringing up intent, right? So the intent in communicating is to get your point across, right? Or let somebody know how you feel or what you want or what you need. Intent and impact are totally different.
Right.
So you shutting down, needing a minute to process, that's the intent. The impact could be the other person feels like you don't care.
Right.
There is a part of communication that we call impact statements and also direct request. So an impact statement is when I ask you to come home or call me if you're going to be late and you don't call me, then I feel like you don't care that I'm cooking dinner and you don't care. A direct request is I would like for you to call me if you're going to be late so that I can cook dinner late.
Right.
Both of those are healthy ways of communicating. So impact and then direct requests.
Yeah, we use that in school. They tell us to use the I statements too. Hey, I would like for you to stop running in the hall. And I may even tell you why, because you may slip and fall. I don't want you to get hurt. And then there are times I forget to use that and say, stop running in the hall because you know the rules, and I think we do a lot of that. But I try to be more intentional with what I'm asking, in particular for students. But even in friendships, relationships, I think as adults, it's a little bit harder at times because of our pride. To tell the other person what you want, what you need, what you don't want, what you don't need. I think I'm getting better at it, but I also have my moments where I realize I'm not doing this too well. I'm slipping.
Or we assume, right? We assume that they know how we feel, know what we want, know what we don't like without communicating it. Like every time you ask me to go eat sushi, I say no. So the next time you ask me, the 10th time you ask me, I'm going to be like, don't you know I don't like sushi? Because you keep asking me that instead of saying I don't like sushi. Right. So it's important not to assume that people understand what you want and communicate it to them.
Now, do you think it's good or wise, like friendships, just me and my buddies hanging out, that as we're talking, I kind of share, hey, I might be like this sometimes. If I'm quiet, don't get worried about me. I'm good. I'm just thinking for a little bit. And when I come out of it, I might even share what I'm thinking about. It's a random thought. Or I get this a lot lately from coworkers. They'll ask me, well, how are you feeling? Because they know my dad passed. And I tell them up front, some days I don't know. I mean, it depends on the moment. It depends on what I have for breakfast. It depends on how I turn the car. I said, I don't know all the time. And so I really can't always answer that.
Right.
And
that is a true thing. Like, you can have an emotion and not have a word for it. And a lot of times people want to know, how are you doing or how are you feeling? And you're like, I don't know. Like, I don't have the word for it right now. And leave it like that. And people should be okay with that. I don't have the word for it. Don't try to guess. Don't say, are you happy, sad, mad? I don't know. Now you ask me this in an hour, I may have a different answer for you. But right now, I don't know how I feel. And that's okay.
Right. Now, let's talk about body language a little bit more, because as we are communicating with people, we are watching them. We're watching. I'm a watcher. When somebody moves, I'm watching maybe their hands and what they're doing. If they feel like they're shuffling, or if it looks like they're trying to escape, or sometimes they're moving too close. I got coworkers, they want to talk and no, don't talk in my face. Come on, back away. Let's talk about communication and body language. Why is that so important as well?
It's important because words can have different meanings, right? And then there's universal body language, like, get out of my face, come here, hello, things like that are understood. You roll your eyes, it means you're not interested in what I'm saying. So be careful that your body language matches what you're saying.
Right.
Like, if I'm saying, oh, I want to be here, but I'm like, this, I don't want to be here. So it's important, and we call it being congruent, that your body language matches what you're saying. And the only way that can happen is if you know exactly how you feel, right? If I say, oh, I'm okay, but I'm like head down, maybe even tears in my eyes, it doesn't match, right? And people get confused.
Okay. Yeah. Today we had a meeting. I'm telling on myself. I was trying to be there at the meeting. I was trying to be focused, and I had to catch my body language at times, because I'm like, oh no, sit up, pay attention. Because my brain was, I'm in my room setting up. I'm gonna move this chair over here, I'm gonna move this desk. But then I had to remind myself, as I caught myself, sit up and pay attention. This is good stuff. It may be a little long, but pay attention. And I think we have to be cognizant of our body language too. Even when I'm being impatient, standing in line, somebody's taking forever, I have to be mindful of how I'm standing, how I'm looking. Because I don't want anybody to feel like I'm trying to rush them, especially if they can't go anywhere. If we're in a line, we just got to wait for the line to move. Why am I going to get upset because somebody's in front of me and somebody else is in front of them, and so forth and so on.
Right.
But I think that's what we have to recognize or pay attention to ourselves. We're so easy to look at somebody else, but we got to turn and focus on how we're communicating our thoughts and feelings.
That's why it's important to know how you feel.
Yeah.
And to check in with yourself. Like, am I tired? Am I disinterested? Do I want to be at home? Do I want to be in my room? And then once you check in with yourself and you know how you're doing, then your body language will match how you feel.
Right. Okay. And real quick for the listeners, watchers, viewers, This is important because this is information you can take back
Mhm.
in any situation, whether it's with your kids, if you have kids, your significant other, friends, your homie down the street, neighbor, anybody. And in particular, I feel like interacting with strangers too. Um, sometimes we send off the wrong message to people that we don't know, and they tend to look at us as not being friendly because they don't know us.
Mhm.
But this is good for the workplace. I think in every social situation we're in, learning about the communication styles, how we communicate, um, I guess what's not necessarily neither good nor bad in certain situations, and just being self-aware of,
Mhm.
what am I feeling in this moment that's allowing me to be either very aggressive or passive or even assertive, because
Mhm.
maybe I'm just having a wonderful day, and sunny days are sinking in my head, and I'm walking around just good, and I'm feeling good with communicating with people.
Right. Right.
You know, um, let's talk about some of the, I guess, some of the skills that we can use to help us become better communicators.
Um, Active listening, because a lot of times we're not listening. People are talking, we are hearing, but we're not listening. Like right now, you probably hear the air conditioner in your house, or you hear the traffic outside, but you're not listening to it.
Right.
So when you're interacting with people, you have to be intentional in listening, not to respond, but to hear what they're saying. I don't know if people tell you you're a good listener or not, but a good listener is somebody that the way a person knows you're listening is eye contact, the nodding, uh, facing towards you, not away from you, and then asking clarifying questions like, what did you mean by that? Or how was that? Or repeat what you said. And then reflecting
Right.
is when you repeat back what someone says to you, but not like a parrot, not word for word. Um, and then there's reflecting with emotion, where you are saying, it sounds like you're worried, or it sounds like you were scared. You're paying attention to what they're saying, and then you're using empathy to put yourself in their shoes and think like, well, if that happened to me, I would be angry.
Right.
So sounds like maybe that made you upset, right? So reflecting, body language to let them know you're listening, and what was the other one I said? Active listening, reflecting,
If we talked about nodding just to make
nodding,
sure that,
body
yes,
language, body language,
yeah,
right?
because that is important, because there are times when if you're having a conversation with somebody and you get nothing from them.
Hmm.
I know me, I'll just stop talking, and then maybe they don't know that that little head nod is
Yeah,
important,
yeah.
um or sometimes the facial expressions, when you're talking, your eyes light up or whatever, but if
Hmm.
you're looking around and
Right.
you're
And
not
now
paying attention.
the phone is a big thing,
I
because now
know.
people are on their phone. You go out on a date, they're on their phone. You're in a meeting, they're on their
Yep.
phone. Your best friend, y'all are sitting having dinner, they're on their phone. Let's not do that.
Yeah, turn that phone, and I know people feel like, oh, you're hiding something. I've seen all the memes and all the little
Mhm.
discussions on YouTube and Instagram. No, if you're having dinner with somebody, just if you have your ringer off, I used to turn my ringer off and put it upside down,
Yeah,
because if I know if it's right side up and that phone
don't look
lights up, I'm gonna look at it.
at it. Hmm.
Oh, that's a message. Oh, somebody's calling. Oh, somebody sent a text.
Right.
Facebook just reminded me about a picture from 40 years ago. All these things. And you want to be intentional with the
Hmm.
person you're with. If I'm with my boys, put the phone away. We're supposed to be hanging out. If it's homecoming, let's sit back and talk about, school back in the days. Put the
Right.
phone down. We didn't even have phones then. So let's pretend like
Sure
we're
did.
going way back when we didn't have
Hmm.
phones.
And I get it. Like if you have young children at home, you want to know
Right.
they're okay. Maybe make an agreement that in 20 minutes we both can check our phones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's good to communicate and say, hey guys, or whoever, give me a second. I just need to check this to make sure. Okay.
Yep.
And then go back to resume. I
Mhm.
think, when we talk about communication, the manners that we exhibit play an important role. If you never say, excuse me, I need to check this, my child's at home, or, somebody in my family's sick, or my boss may be calling me because I'm on call,
Right.
let people know, talk to people and let them know up front. Now, if you got to look at your phone and say, well, my wife is going to call soon, and you may not be on the right in the right activity. Yeah.
You're not on the right date.
Right. But that is important, that we are intentional and we're there with the company that we're interacting with. Like even as just friends, sometimes we think with our friends we don't need to give them that same attention. We do, because that's an easy way to lose friends.
Yeah, you got to be present. You got to
Right.
be present with people.
Absolutely. So we talked about the act of listening, which is important. And I think we all are guilty. I'm guilty of, what am I going to say? How I'm going to respond. And I know sometimes even on the podcast, I'm listening to the person because they may say something that I need to follow up. They may make a statement. I'm like, ooh, I like that. Let me jot that down real quick so I can do a follow-up. We don't necessarily do that in our everyday interactions. Let's say hanging out with my buddies, unless they say something that's shocking. Whoa. What you say? Hold on. Say that one more time. That's a little bit different. It's more relaxed. But I do think we have to work on, and I say we, all of us, of listening, even at school. Sometimes as educators, we have a bad habit of not listening to our students, especially if that's the student that's talking all day long and they won't stop talking. However, they may need to talk to you, because what if they go home and there's nobody to talk to?
Right.
Yeah.
People feel seen when they know you're listening to them.
Right. Yeah. Well, now I do have a problem with this. When I'm out, I must be a conversation magnet. I get random people that just want to have conversations with me. They share their personal business. So I'm trying to be nice and listening. Yeah, thank you.
That's why they're doing it. It's because you are listening and they know you're listening. So I'm gonna give you everything because you are actually listening to me.
Yeah, but sometimes I'm like, why didn't you talk to the other 5 people standing in line or over there?
They're not listening.
Yeah, and there are times I'm like, I really don't want to have this conversation. However, I have to think about this. We don't know what people need in that moment.
Yeah.
And they may really need somebody to just hear them. They don't want to answer. They won't want a response. They just want you to hear them out.
Right.
So I'll do that. And and I'll say, all right, you take care, have a good day, great talking to you. Then I'm like, who was that person? I don't know. And in particular, a lot of older people would do that. They'll stop and have conversations with you. In particular, like one place I go to eat in the mornings, I had an older gentleman. He just stopped and had this long conversation. I was trying to get to work and I didn't want to be rude, but I'm like, thank you for communicating with me. I didn't say that. That sounds corny, but I was thinking about it. Like, he really needed to talk, and maybe it was something I needed to hear.
And I mean, you could just not look at them, not listen to them, turn your back towards them. The body language we're talking about. Then, but that's not who you are.
Right.
That's not who you are. So it's a blessing to be
able. But Stephanie, sometimes I don't want to talk.
I know.
But I can't say that. I won't say that because, like I said, I don't know what people need in that moment. And maybe it's something I need. Maybe it's something I need to hear. It's not always, the fact that they just needed to talk. Maybe they had a message for me in that conversation that when I start driving down the road, I'm like, oh, wow, they said that. communication, it comes out of, sometimes it just comes out of the blue. You just don't
Yeah.
know what's in the message.
And they're just happy to find someone who will listen to them.
Yeah. But let's talk before we wrap things up. Negotiation and communication. Let's talk about that real quick. And why is that so important?
So if you cherish the person, when I say cherish, I mean they matter. They can be a
Right.
stranger,
Right.
they can be a coworker, they can be somebody you're dating, they could be your sister. But if you cherish them and respect them as a human being, you're willing to make some compromises. It doesn't have to be my way or the highway.
Right.
You're open to negotiating to where I don't have to get my way, you don't have to get your way, but we can meet somewhere in the middle. But the only way you can negotiate is if you communicate. If I tell my son, you got to be home at 10, I mean, he's 20 something now, so I can't do that. But when he was younger, if I tell him you have to be home at 10, and then he comes home at 10:30, thinking, it's just a little bit after 10, I'm not in trouble. But actually, had we had a conversation and you said, can I come in at 10:30? I'll be, I'm going to be an hour away, can't get here by 10, or whoever I'm going to see doesn't come on till 9:30, whatever. And we can have a conversation and we can agree
Right.
that it doesn't have to be what I said. I can bend a little bit, 10:15, right? 10:15, 10:20. When you negotiate, it means that each person gets something out of it. They may not get what they want, but they get something out of it. There's a benefit for both parties when you negotiate.
Right. And I do think that's important. And we don't use that enough. Not to say we don't do it, because I think we do, but we don't use it enough. Sometimes we put demands and say it's only my way or no way. And if you don't do it my way, I'll never talk to you ever again. Instead of just saying, okay, let's have a conversation. Here's this, is that, let's come halfway, and once we're in agreement, then we're good, It's the same thing in the classroom. We have to do that with our students at times. But as adults, it's my way or no way. When I say don't talk, you don't talk.
Yeah.
But then again, that one student's going to take it, well, you told me not to talk, so I'm not going to say anything. And now, so that's what we have to be careful with that. I'm being very aggressive, because sometimes that kid could take me literally, instead of just saying, hey, look, let's negotiate about this. I know you'd like to talk, so when we have the next lesson, I'll let you be the spokesperson. You can tell the class all about it. Yeah.
And you can't be rigid in communication.
Right.
You have to be flexible. You have to be willing to bend and hear the other person out.
Absolutely. Well, Stephanie, we've been on for a minute talking about communication. It's always great to have this conversation. One of the things I like to do is always ask my guests to leave our listeners with some words of encouragement or words of wisdom. It could be about anything. It doesn't have to be about communication. And one day, I hope to have you back on. We can get to the communication or relationship discussions. And that was one for our viewers. That was one of the things I did before. I used to have my relationship panel, and we shared information about relationships from our perspectives. Not to get into arguments and fussing and fighting, but to find solutions to help people have positive relationships. So that will be coming in the future.
Yeah. Okay.
But at this point, it's on you, Stephanie.
All right. So I think it's important to remember that most people in the world don't wake up in the morning saying, I'm going to hurt someone today. I'm going to cause damage to someone today. Unless you're a sociopath. And no, that's like 1% of the population. Most people do what they do because it serves a purpose. Now, the intent is to serve a purpose for them. The impact can be damaging. So it's important to remember that why is a person doing what they're doing outside of trying to hurt me? Are they being protective? Are they being cautious? Are they scared? Are they protecting themselves? Do they feel unsafe? So just try to remember that, yes, the behavior does serve a purpose, but the purpose is usually not to harm. So try to get at what the real purpose of the behavior is, and don't think people are just out to hurt you.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Stephanie, I thank you for sharing that information about communication. I'm glad you said that. You can find safe space in communication. And this podcast, I like to see it as a safe space for people to be able to share. Although it's for the vitiligo community, it's for the humanity of all of us. It's not just about the condition. It's about us being people. People can share. It's never a aha, gotcha moment. Aha. No, I don't do any of that. I just like for people to share something, because I always say somebody's going to watch this and they're going to find some useful tools that they can use in their everyday life from this, whether they're learning about a condition or learning about, communication styles. And soon I'm going to have somebody come on dealing with music, all these different things, we're people. And I would like to touch on things that I really think are important for us living on this planet. And music's one of them. So I'm going to bring some music on here. So once again, thank you, Stephanie. And for the viewers and listeners and watchers out there, I'd like to thank you too for tuning in. You have been listening to and watching Living Life and Love with Vitiligo. I'm your host, Mark Braxton from Raleigh, North Carolina. Just remember, as I always say, make sure you show somebody love, whether it's a family member, whether it's a coworker, a stranger on the street, your kids. Everybody needs love. Everybody is in need of love. The world is in need of love, whether they're far or near from you. But most of all, before you can show somebody else that you love them, look in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you, because we don't do enough of that. Y'all take care. Peace, and I'll see you again.